The dawn came cold and bitter across the Wyoming plains, the kind of morning that bit through wool and skin alike. Wind swept the snow into ghostly spirals that danced over the dry earth, whispering through the empty fence posts and the splintered boards of an old barn that leaned against the coming day. Inside, a lone lantern burned, its flame small but steady, like the man who owned it. Elias Boone had long ago learned to live with silence. His cattle were gone, his fields half dead, and the only company he kept was the slow creak of the barn door and the crack of firewood splitting in his hands. Folks in town spoke his name in half-whispers, said he'd fought in the war, that he'd killed more men than he'd buried, that his wife and boy never came back from the fever that swept through the valley. Elias never confirmed any of it. He just worked, ate little, and slept when the whiskey ran out. That morning, as the first light broke through the storm clouds, something strange caught his eye. A dark shape slumped against the corner of the barn half buried in snow. He stopped dead, the axe in his hand going still. For a long moment, the wind howled between them. Then he moved closer. It was a woman. Barefoot. Her skin ghost white and lips cracked blue. Her dress, once pale, was torn to ribbons and stiff with frost. An old satchel lay beside her, its strap tangled around her arm. Her fingers twitched when he knelt beside her, but her eyes barely opened. "Please," she whispered, the word breaking like glass on her tongue. "I haven't eaten in days." Elias froze. The last time he'd reached out to help someone, it had cost his brother his life, ambushed on a trail because of a stranger's lie. He'd sworn never to open his door to another soul again. Yet something about her, the quiet desperation, the way she clung to that satchel like it was her whole world, cut through the wall he'd built around his heart. He shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around her shoulders. The wool swallowed her small frame as he lifted her easily, his breath rising in the cold as he carried her inside. The fire cracked to life beneath his hands, light spilling over the cabin walls. Slowly, warmth returned to her cheeks. When she finally spoke again, her voice was soft, uncertain. "My name's Clara Dane. I was riding west with a wagon party. We were attacked, outlaws, 3 of them. They took everything." Elias didn't answer. He just stared at the satchel near the fire, the initial CD stitched in fading thread, and then toward the window. Beyond the snowfield, the dark ridge loomed, and through the rising mist, 3 shadows moved on horseback, heading straight toward the ranch. Night fell heavy over the plains, the wind carrying a cold that crept through bone and soul alike. The horses were close now. Clara could hear them before he did, her face pale in the flickering firelight. The sound of hooves thudded like a heartbeat in the frozen dark, growing louder, nearer, relentless. She rose from the chair, clutching Elias's coat tighter around her shoulders. "It's them," she whispered. "Jed Crow and his men. They'll kill you for helping me." Elias didn't move. He sat by the dying fire, eyes lost in the orange glow, as if he were staring back through the years. Outside, the wind moaned through the chinks in the cabin walls. "They won't," he said finally, his voice low, rough as gravel. He stood, walked to the corner of the room, and pulled up a loose plank from the floorboards. Clara watched as he knelt, reaching into the dark hollow beneath. When he lifted the lid of the old chest, the air changed, heavier somehow, like the ghost of his past had been waiting all this time to breathe again. Inside lay a Colt revolver, polished from years of use, and beside it a tarnished badge, its star faintly glinting in the lamplight. U.S. Marshal. Her eyes widened. "You were." "Was," he said. "Before Crow's men killed my brother. Before I decided justice wasn't worth the blood it cost." He held the badge a moment longer, thumb tracing the worn edges, then placed it beside the revolver. The fire popped softly, the wind hissed under the door, and the echo of distant laughter drifted from the ridge. He loaded each bullet with calm precision, like a man nailing down his own fate. The metallic clicks broke the silence in slow rhythm, 6 in all. Clara's breath trembled. "You can still leave," he said without looking up. "There's a trapdoor under the bed. Crawl space leads out to the old creek. You'll be clear by dawn." She shook her head, voice breaking. "They'll kill you." Elias looked at her then, his eyes calm, endless as the prairie night. "Maybe. But not before they stop riding." The first shout came not long after. 3 silhouettes rode up through the storm, torches burning bright against the darkness. The horses pawed at the frozen earth as the riders drew rein, snow swirling around them. One voice, hard and grinning, called out, "We know she's in there, Boone. Hand her over, and maybe we'll let you die easy." Elias stepped out onto the porch. The wind caught his coat, flaring it like the shadow of some forgotten legend. The world fell silent but for the groan of the barn and the whisper of snow. He didn't shout back. He just stood there, a still figure carved against the storm, and waited for the first move. Crow was the first to sneer, his breath steaming in the cold. Didn't think the old ghost still had fight left in him. Elias's eyes narrowed slightly. "Try me." The moment stretched thin, then split with a flash. His revolver barked once, and Crow's torch tumbled into the snow. Another gun rose to fire, but Elias was faster. 2 more shots, thunder across the frozen valley, and silence followed. The wind carried the smoke away like confession from a sinner's lips. Inside, Clara stood frozen, hands over her mouth. She'd seen men shoot before, but never like that. There was no anger in him, no panic. Just quiet resolve, as if every motion had already been decided long ago. When the echo faded, she stepped out slowly, her breath white in the air. Elias stood by the railing, gun lowered, eyes on the horizon. "They won't bother you again," he said softly. She looked at the 3 shapes half buried in the snow, then at him, the lonely rancher who'd just become something far greater, and far sadder, than she could ever have imagined. "You were right," she whispered. "You didn't stop riding after all." He gave a faint smile, or something like it, and holstered the revolver. By dawn, the storm had quieted. The snow lay smooth and untouched, except for 3 shallow mounds by the fence line. Elias worked in silence, shovel scraping against the frozen earth, while Clara brewed the last of the coffee inside. When he was done, he stood a moment, hat in hand, breath fogging the air. She came to the door, holding his coat, the same one he'd given her the night before. "You'll freeze without it," she said. He looked at it, then at her. "It suits you better." The sun was just rising when she saddled one of the outlaw's horses. The light painted the sky in golden rose, touching the frost on her hair. She turned once more before she left. "I'll come back," she said, "when the spring's kind again." He nodded, watching as she rode toward the open plain, her figure growing smaller against the vastness of the world. They say Elias Boone never spoke much after that winter. Folks passing through the valley saw him working his land again, tending to his fences, fixing the roof one nail at a time. But if you ride past Boone's barn at sunrise, you might see a woman's coat still hanging by the fire, soft wool faded by years of waiting, a memory of the day he chose mercy over silence, and found peace where vengeance used to live.